I thought it may be useful to talk about an outsider's perspective on US politics. In recent weeks, we've seen some very surprising changes in the US political scene that have kind of caught many institutional investors here in Europe by surprise. Perhaps the most obvious moment was when we heard that Amazon had decided not to continue with the building of a new headquarters unit in Queens, New York. We read about how they had been put off by protesters, and we also read about the fiery young Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC as she's now known, a 2-month-old congresswoman who has effectively led the complaints. We were all surprised and shocked. Why would anyone turn down 25,000 high-paid jobs? Until you started to look behind the headlines. And you realize that the negotiations that Amazon had been having with New York and its previous history of Seattle left some doubt about exactly how wisely taxpayer dollars were being spent in attracting them to the city. There are two sides to every story, and it's clear that the residents of Queens were very concerned that bringing in jobs would simply push up not only house prices, but push out the domestic retailers who were there already. But these are all things you'd expect to be resolved over time. Instead, we've seen a very bloody spat that has got everyone thinking about what is going on in America. And it's very interesting that it coincides with a time when we are seeing increasing doubt in the international marketplace about what Donald Trump is doing, and we are seeing an increasing domestic agenda in the States towards political solutions to many of the problems that the country faces, most obviously income inequality, creeping poverty on the streets, and homelessness and medical care. All these things seem to have come to the fore, and they do have institutional investors around the world interested, suddenly pricking up their ears to find out what's going on. And when we hear that US socialists such as Bernie Sanders are intending to stand again, it makes us very interested. Is that a bad thing for markets? Not necessarily. Let's give Donald Trump credit where credit's due. The tax cuts last year have certainly boosted the economy to a stage where the US is one of the few global economies actually showing sign of growth. If you take a look at US employment, it's never been so high across some of the minorities in the US marketplace, and we've never seen women participating in the labour market to the extent they are today. Yet, on the other hand, we've never seen such income disparity between those who have and those that have not. We're very aware that the lowest classes in society are spending most of their money on simple things like accommodation, food and transport, while the richest own more and more of ownership. That's a very interesting dynamic, and it's no surprise that finally we're beginning to see that reflected in the political process. But it's also clear that Donald Trump identified another major thing that needs to change in the US, and that's infrastructure. Rebuilding US infrastructure to create a more efficient business platform is going to be beneficial not just to companies, to corporates, but also to the working population, and that's something that is on the agenda. We certainly get the feeling here in the UK that the rise in news stories about US politics hints that congressional leaders and politicians across the states are now considering all the things that need to be addressed, whether it's infrastructure, taxation policy, medical care, and especially education, to make sure that the future American workers are best able to cope with a global economy. All these discussions seem to be underway, and that can only be a positive thing when it comes down to considering investments into the USA. Now, it may strike viewers watching this video in the States that here we have a Brit lecturing America on politics when we have so clearly damaged our own reputation with the Brexit negotiations from Europe. But it's always easier to comment about other people than yourself.